We're interrupting our regular program to bring you WPVM's public affairs programming. Today's interview is for the upcoming election, North Carolina Senate District number 46. Warren Daniels and John Ager are the candidates. Warren Daniels did not respond to our invitation, so we do have John Ager here. John Ager is the friendly farmer from Fairview who has fed us all very well from his farm, Hickory Nut Gap. Dr. Chris Cooper is the moderator. Dr. Cooper is a Robert Lee Madison Distinguished Professor and Director of the Hare Institute for Public Policy at Western Carolina University. He also has a book coming out very shortly, Anatomy of a Purple State. Readers will be introduced to everything that has made North Carolina the most purple of purple states, from the state constitution and the influence of think tanks to the growing racial diversity of the state and the limitations on the governor's power. Dr. Cooper, thank you for coming in and moderating, and John Ager, thank you for coming in for the interview. I will turn the programming over to you two.
Hey everybody, this is Chris Cooper from Western Carolina University, and I have the good fortune to be here today with John Ager, who will introduce himself in just a second. This is part of a series that we're doing with WPVM, where we're have candidate forums with folks running for General Assembly seats, folks running for county commission seats, folks running for city council seats, and oftentimes these are a little more formal, where we have tight times, more like a debate, but this one's going to be more of an informal conversation with John Ager, who is one of your candidates for state senate. We're going to learn more about him, learn more about his district, his positions, and what he would do if he were elected. And I just want to say at the front end that we need a few things, right, for democracy to work well. We need our county boards of elections and state board of elections to do a good job administering our elections, and we're very fortunate in Buncombe County and in the rest of our part of our state and the state in general to have county boards of elections do that very well. We need also interested citizens, and if you are listening, then clearly you count yourself among those folks, and we need people to put their hand up and run for office, and I don't think we spend nearly enough time thanking people for the act of running for office. The only way we can improve our democracy, improve our country, improve our communities is to have people actually put themselves out there and run for office. So with that, I want to say thank you to John Ager, who is here with me today, and give him a little bit of time to introduce himself to the listeners, who he is, how he got here, and why he's running for office.
Well, thank you, Chris. This is John Ager. And just on Chris's pitch that we need more people to run for office, it's running for office for me has been a real joy. It's not lucrative, don't get me wrong, but it's been a real joy. You make a lot of new friends. It's good for your thinking ability. You go down to Raleigh, and you get hit with every possible problem and industry that you may not have known much about, and it's like going back to college for me. I loved it. So I'm John Ager. I was in the North Carolina House for 8 years, and one thing I'm proud of is I think I'm the only House member to never miss a vote. There were a couple of close calls, but I don't think I ever missed a vote. And I thought I had retired. I live out at Hickory Nut Gap Farm, which it also needs my attention, and I've got to prepare my family, help my family. Is we have a large family. I've married Annie Clark Ager. We've been married for 53 years. We've been a great team together. 4 sons and 9 grandchildren. So I'm busy, and I have a lot to work on at home. So, but I decided this election. This was probably the most consequential election of my lifetime. And I said, I'd like to be a part of it. So I have decided to run for North Carolina Senate District 46, which includes the very ruby red counties of McDowell and Burke. And my opponent, who does a lot of the gerrymandering in Raleigh, my opponent's Warren Daniel. and he decided that he wasn't satisfied with his Buncombe district, so he gerrymandered it, trying to link together as many red precincts in Buncombe as he could. I happen to live in one of them, Fairview. Just to give you an idea, and in case you're wondering whether you have the chance to vote for me or not, my district starts in Fairview, Broad River, goes up through Black Mountain over to Barnardsville, just below Madison County over to Sandy Mush, and then down the other side of Buncombe County to Leicester, and ends up in Candler. It's like a big horseshoe. Makes no rational sense, and is really only possible because the North Carolina State Supreme Court said, go ahead, guys, you can gerrymander to your heart's desire. So maybe that's a good enough introduction. Hickory Nut Gap Farm, as Chris was just saying, he actually has read my book, We Plow God's Fields, about my grandfather-in-law who devoted himself to building up agriculture in Western North Carolina, and that is also a big interest of mine.
Yeah. And as a side note, I highly recommend the book for anybody who's interested in local history and how kind of agriculture and politics have mixed together in this region for a long time and how they continue to. So, you were, I think, as you said, obviously very well, were in the House for 8 years before, and now you're running for a Senate seat. And so we can talk more about why you're deciding to run, but I'm kind of curious at the outset, what differences did you notice between the House and the Senate? And obviously you've got some other family in the House right now. And how would you use that knowledge to help legislate better for folks in your district?
Well, the House is 120 people. The Senate's 50. That's a good place to start. And of course, you work a lot with senators when you're in the House. The House was, because of that fact, maybe partly it's more kind of you feel like it's more congenial. The real pleasure of being in the House or the Senate, I suppose, but the House, is you make all these great friends all across the state. I enjoyed that. I was in the minority the whole time, in the supermajority most of the time. We had a couple of years where we could sustain the governor's vetoes, which was great. It gave us real power to negotiate bills. So I don't want to paint such a glorious picture of being down there that I don't tell you how frustrating it can be to be in the supermajority and to have great ideas and to see people with poorer ideas getting their ideas put forward and yours being ignored. But to me, the Senate is a bit more of a club. What I've noticed is that some of the people that I respect the least have gotten power in the Senate because they were willing to do the dirty work of Senator Berger and make him look good while they were pulling strings in the background. And so I talk to some of these guys. They give me a rationale for, say, like why they didn't support Medicaid expansion for all those years. And, you just shake your head. Where in the world does that talking point come from? I just feel like I think Berger, and maybe because there's fewer people, just maintains better control over his caucus. That may be, and I think on the whole, the Senate is even more conservative than the House. And I think you noticed that in the last budget debacle between the House and the Senate, where the House was willing, as needs to happen, to increase teacher pay more, and the Senate said no. Senate's really doggedly trying to keep lowering taxes, no matter how many state employees and education people we're short, and creating awful turnover in those areas. So maybe that's a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think you talk very well about what it's like to be in the super minority, what it's like to be in the minority. And I think what we don't know about this next election is if you were elected, whether you would be in the super minority or the minority. But I don't think there's many folks who think you'd likely be in the majority as a Democrat. So with that sort of knowledge, what are some bills? What are some things that you think you could get through the General Assembly, assuming that you would not have a majority, assuming that you would be in the minority? What are some bills you could work with some Republicans with, and perhaps actually get out of the chamber?
Well, thank you, and that's something I think about a lot. As I said before, my particular interest is agriculture, and agriculture can be pretty nonpartisan. What I felt like I was up against in Raleigh, on both sides, was they were pretty much devoted to keeping the big hog farms, the big chicken farms, the big turkey farms, keeping them viable despite the problems they were causing to the environment, and the whole problem with CAFOs and all that. And so I tended to buck them on some of that. We had a real fun tour down east of all those farms, and it's something to see. We're in Buncombe, Hickory Nut Gap Farm. We have tried to figure out ways to do agriculture and compete and to create supply chains that we can get our stuff in the grocery stores, say. And I would like the state agriculture people to recognize that and to help us, because our mountain farmers, we don't have the big acreage they have down east. We need some help in competing in that world, and we're getting some, but we need a lot more. My one real big interest, which would seem obvious, is soil health. We are big proponents of what's the broad term we call now regenerative agriculture. We think that you can create great soils, rebuild our soils. We've been really hard on our soils here in America, and there are techniques now where we still barely understand all of the microbial and fungal activities going on just below the surface of the land. It's like the universe. It's just too complex. But we know how to create better environments down there. And the hope, and I don't think we've proved this yet, but the hope is that we can actually see the carbon in the air as a resource that we can draw down into the soil to rebuild our soils. And basically carbon is what creates the plant structures and those microbial activities, all of that. So I did introduce a soil health bill that are being introduced across the country, and I think I have a good chance of getting that passed. We have a robust soil and water state effort. Lots of people working on that. I would love to see our mountain farmers be able to sign up for understanding that better. It keeps a lot of the 10-10-10 out of your fields that are causing problems, erosion, really pollution problems. It's all gotten very expensive. So that's one area, and and along with that, and I think there is real broad bipartisan support for this. Is supporting the Farmland Preservation Program to put easements on their farms. We have a Farmland Preservation Board that's pretty well funded, and we have preserved our land at the farm, which I'm extremely proud of, and because our land would, on a commercial development, would be very valuable, but we decided we wanted to keep it the way it is and have done all that hard work as a family. So I think that's another area, farmland preservation. If you think about it just in broad terms, the population of the world is increasing, and the climate change is reducing a lot of the places in the world that are good for agriculture. And you drive around the United States and you see a lot of corn and soybeans, which are mostly gone into cattle feed. We're going to need to slowly shift over to to growing human food again. And my niece, Annie Louise, on Flying Cloud Farm has just done a great job of growing produce for the people of Buncombe County. And I think we're going to need more of that and less corn silage and feed corn. So those are some areas. And I'm good friends with the ag senator and the ag house guy. So I think they wouldn't be too disappointed to see me back down there.
And so it probably stands to reason then if you were to end up back in the General Assembly, in the Senate in this case, you'd try to get on committees related to agriculture.
Correct.
Okay. Great.
Agriculture, and there's an AGNR committee, which is a committee that deals with funding of these and also funding of environmental, the environmental department, DEQ, which I would another area we need a lot of help in is cleaning up the forever chemicals that are getting into our water.
Great. So I think it's a really nice overview of kind of your legislative agenda, things you think you could actually, again, get passed in the current environment. But I think one advantage, really, of you or Senator Daniel, is you've both been in office before, and so you understand the constituency service aspect of this job as well. And so if you were to go back to the General Assembly, to the Senate, to win Senate District 46, what would be your approach to constituency service?
Well, I'll tell you what, that's, as it turned out when I went down there, that was something I enjoyed the most. We were in the middle of a pandemic for part of that time. There was people frustrated trying to get financial help. One of the benefits of being in the supermajority is that maybe you have a little more time to work on constituent services, which I really enjoyed and got to meet a lot of great people, and it's very, very important. The key to it, I'll be honest, the key to it is to have a great legislative assistant who is willing. You can say, I got a phone call from so-and-so or an email. They're having a problem with this. Can you call the Department of Revenue and find out what's really going on? And having that person in your office is real important.
Yeah, that's great. So we've talked a lot, and we'll continue to talk about some things that you didn't love about the legislative session and about what's happening in Raleigh. But try to put maybe one positive one in here. What is something that you thought went well last legislative session as you watched what was happening? Something where maybe it's a piece of policy, maybe it's an approach to something, but it's something you thought actually worked pretty well in Raleigh. We don't hear many of those stories.
No question, Medicaid expansion. It was a home run for the people of North Carolina. We have 500,000 people signed up by now, at least more than that now. That is people who now can go to the doctor. We were estimating 3,000 people a year dying because they had no access to health insurance. It doesn't cost the state anything. The federal government pays 90%, and the hospitals have agreed to pay about 10%. And I will add, back when we were talking about selling Mission Hospital, I asked Ron Paulus, I said, if we could get Medicaid expansion passed, could we keep our nonprofit hospital? And he said he thought we could. We have a difficult patient mix here. If we could get compensated for a lot of those patients, I think we could keep the old hospital. So I think that the delay in passing Medicaid expansion is in large part the result. The result has been having to an HCA hospital that we're none of us very happy with.
That's actually, I'd like to ask you more about that. So are there legislative solutions to what appears to be at least perceived as the mess of HCA here in Asheville? Are there things the legislature can do to help this situation?
Well, there have been some things talked about. There was some effort to give the Attorney General in North Carolina more power in managing these transfers. It's happening all over the state. There's a kind of a monopolization of hospitals here. when I look back on the whole HCA thing, what I feel like was our failure as leaders was, why in the world didn't we ask the old mission to just bid out the transfer? Why did we let Ron Paulus and others just say it's a done deal, HCA is going to buy it? There were other hospital entities interested, but I think these transfers need to be looked at very carefully. When you get monopoly situations, and I think this is another thing we agree on in a bipartisan way, when you have no competition in a medical world, then there's tendencies to push prices up and to not really deliver great service. So I think those things are what I think we really need to keep looking at healthcare as a way to make people in North Carolina's lives less expensive, less stressful. But the big thing was getting Medicaid expansion passed.
Great. And so the obvious follow-up then is, what has not gone well this last legislative session? What are, one or two or, maybe up to three things that you thought were just, bad policy that are bad for this region and for the state?
Yeah. So, I think one embarrassing thing to me for the GOP leadership is that they couldn't come up with a budget. Just as a side note, something I am working hard with a wonderful committee is bringing a first-class Western North Carolina state-run museum to the area. Other regions have museums. We got an appropriation in the governor's budget, and we've got some great legislators who are backing us, especially Senator Corbin, and I was so hoping that we could get that small initial grant into the budget. So the failure of the budget was a disappointment. The biggest disappointment for me is what they did yesterday in the House, which was put to vote on $460-odd million for vouchers. I'm sort of sympathetic to the school choice ideas. I introduced a bill that said that any state money that goes to a private school, the private school needs to be accredited. I think a lot of these so-called schools are probably homeschoolers in the basement of a church, and I think that the one of the legit accrediting people need to, take a look at each of these schools to make sure they're really schools. The last statistic I saw, that 42% of the private schools getting the money are accredited, and that's not good. Also, we don't really know how the students are doing in these schools. We have no way to compare how they're doing with the public schools and the charter schools. What I really don't like is that this last bunch of money is going to families that don't really need the voucher, the wealthy families, and I think that's just bad policy, bad use of state money, and I'm very disappointed that they got pressured into bringing everybody back to Raleigh to pass that.
That's great. So I'd seen in the governor's budget this the idea of a Western North Carolina museum. And it's an interesting example. I wasn't planning to talk about it, but I think your mention of Senator Corbin, obviously a Republican from Senate District 50, being in support of this. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about what that museum might look like? I think the listeners might be interested.
Well, yeah. Then thanks for asking. I could go on and on about it, so be careful. Our model for anybody that's been there is the Museum of the Albemarle. Clearly, Western North Carolina has a unique history, very different. Everything about Western North Carolina is quite different from the rest of the state. as a sort of amateur historian, I'm just fascinated by our history. And we have, what now, 13 million, 14 million tourists coming to Asheville. What is their perception of the history in this region? I think it's, log cabin, a guy with a gun coming out his door saying, "Get off my land." The Snuffy Smith hillbilly version of our history. I think these tourists would just love to know the richness of what life is like has been here. So as far as what we've decided is a great location, it would be Haywood County, and it's got good road access. It's in the center of the region. We think this is going to be part of the revitalization of Canton, and so that's where we've really focused. I know that some of the other political people I've talked to said, well, we'd really like something farther out west, maybe something up in the high country. And my vision, and this is just me at this point, is a major institution in Haywood County with a satellite museum, an interpretive museum in the west and up in the high country. We need a museum not only to explain the history and to engage the people that come here and the people that live here in their own history, but we need to collect the artifacts and interpret the artifacts and store the artifacts. It's that kind of a museum. It's a big museum, and so we'll see how it plays out. And we're going to our committee's committed to keep going till we get it. So I hope we can look forward to seeing that soon.
No, that's great. And it's, again, I think a good example of bipartisan compromise, right?
Yes.
Something we don't hear about, not even really compromise, just people across party lines working together for a common goal. So appreciate you bringing that up. So we're having this conversation today in really smack in the middle of downtown Asheville. Your district, as you noted, sort of studiously avoids most of the city of Asheville, but
Yes.
But many of your people who would be your constituents obviously live in Asheville, come to Asheville to eat, to play, to work, all sorts of things. What would a John Ager senatorship look like for the city of Asheville? What kinds of policies could you promote that would help the city, even though, again, it's just mostly outside of your district?
Well, yeah, and of course we all, you can't run for office from Buncombe County and not think about Asheville. And if I could just say one thing, you talked about the Senate, what's different about it? Well, one of the things politically that has happened over my time being down there is that the Senate has always assigned somebody in the Senate, the Republican that represented some small part of Buncombe County, to what I would call meddle in Buncombe County politics, to listen to Buncombe County GOP ideas and try to implement them. When I was first down there, it was Apodaca. One of my finest moments was when we blocked an Apodaca bill, and he was so mad at his own people and for not supporting it. But he wanted to come in and, it used to be, as I understand it, that when you had a local bill that caused local differences, that you needed to have a unified local delegation that agreed with it. Well, Apodaca, then it was Chuck Edwards who was the one that was trying to change, really mostly the political systems here, doing districts and things like that. And now it's my opponent, Warren Daniel, and just to remind people, Warren Daniel is the one responsible for this really unworkable districting of the Board of Education races here in Buncombe County. We told him, he said, this is just not workable. The high school attendance districts are very different. But he, was stubborn about it because, and the night he was here in Buncombe, discussing it with the head of the GOP party, is the night Amy Churchill, who used to be a Republican, is now an independent, on the school board, went to that meeting and said, count me out for this is a bad idea. Don't do it to our school board. No one wants to do it. And there was some sort of altercation, and it was in the paper, and the GOP head of the GOP was convicted of assault of a female that night. That's the kind of thing that happens. So my opponent was there that night. So I really, one of the main things I want to run for is to keep the meddling by the GOP majority out of Buncombe County. Asheville is a very special place. The GOP is trying to talk up how crime-ridden Asheville is, which is not true. It's always a talking point in their playbook. But we have 13 million tourists coming here, and we need to provide them a great experience. But we also need to figure out how to pay for the infrastructure here in Asheville that makes their visit great, and mostly that keeps the infrastructure great for the people that live, work, and visit here from the local area. A lot of my people out in Fairview don't much like coming downtown anymore, and to tell you the truth, I love coming downtown. You just see all kind of interesting people. It's full of life. That's what you want in the city. But we have special challenges. So I would. There's some. We have worked with the TDA side of things to try to figure out how to put, that's tourist money, that's tourist paying hotel tax money. How can we use some of that money to make the downtown a better place? So that's the kind of things I'd like to work on.
That's great. Thanks. And so, that sort of at least tangentially makes me think about the affordable housing crisis not just in Asheville proper, although it is certainly here, but in Western North Carolina kind of writ large. Are there specific policies or things that the legislature could do that you would do if you were elected to try to at least help this problem that seems to be increasing by the day, regardless of who's in charge of the state?
Yeah, Chris, that's such a great question. And I really struggle with that. I just wish that our capitalist system could provide that kind of housing without having the government intervene. But sure seems like we're going to have to intervene. Part of the problem is that Asheville has become a destination for climate refugees, they call themselves. I've run across many people that say, I ask people, I say, why did you move here? They say, well, I was living in Texas. It was super hot, and I was living in California in the wildfires. And the problem is that a lot of those people come having sold their house there, and they have a lot of money in their pocket, and I think our home building companies have way skewed to high-end housing, and we don't have enough of these companies building starter housing and just regular old housing for working people and middle class families. And I think we just have to look at every, is there state land here that we could make available? Do we need to set up incentives? And we're trying everything, and we're putting money into different groups, Habitat for Humanity, trying to solve this problem. But the basic economics are just difficult at this point, and housing materials are super expensive, and finding people to do the work is super expensive. I had the house I raised my boys in burnt down 2 years ago, and I had to rebuild a house on that site, and it's expensive, and I don't really understand how my grandchildren my grandchildren are going to be able to afford to get that starter house built or rented or whatever. It's and I just I don't have any magic bullets on that, but we got to look at everything we can.
Yeah, That's great. Let's talk a little bit about education, and maybe we'll start off talking about K-12 and then move to higher ed in the region a little, if that's all right. But beginning with K-12, I think you talked about, please correct me if I'm wrong, but your we'll call it maybe circumspection at the voucher program that was just passed,
Correct.
maybe downright disagreement with. But what are some things we can be doing statewide to help K through 12 education?
Okay, that's a big question. I was on the education committee in Raleigh, very disappointed in how the legislature thinks about education. They're always looking at political angles. I can't. Now, after listening to all the talk, I said, you know what? If we think freeing up charter schools is a great idea, then I think we need to free up our traditional public schools as well. Let them develop some identity and character. It used to be those schools identified with the communities they lived in, but I don't think that's so true anymore. Of course, we need to pay teachers and bus drivers and custodians and principals more. Hiring excellent principals, training excellent principals, looking for principal talent is a huge part of it. But you know, we for the last 15 years, our especially our teacher pay has lagged. We've gotten rid of the scholarships for high school kids that wanted to go into teaching. The pool in our universities for teachers is pretty much dried up to a considerable degree. People perceive it as a sort of a very hard and very poorly paid job. I really would like, I'm a big proponent. We have good public schools here. My grandson plays on the Reynolds soccer team. I went out last night to watch him play. Another grandson was in the backing up the tractor contest at the fair on Tuesday. He didn't win it. He said he hit a few of the cones, came in fourth, but he was pretty proud. But I've been very pleased. The Reynolds has hired a new guy to help with the FFA program, and he's really making it happen. So admire these devoted people that are devoted to our kids, and my heart goes out when I run into a teacher who said, I love teaching. I did it. I was doing it for all the right reasons, but I just can't raise my family on that money. So without beating the drum too hard, North Carolina progressed over the last many decades by investing in public education. We still have a lot of work to do, especially here in the mountains. A lot of our mountain families have not completely understood how important in this economy a broad, good education is. We certainly don't need every kid to go to college. One of the big challenges we have right now is getting good people in the trades. What I read the other day, that for every 5 tradesmen that are retiring, there's only 2 taking their place. That needs to be an emphasis. There's great jobs in the trades and in the agriculture. So maybe that's enough.
No, that's great. And so that dovetails really nicely, obviously, into a conversation about higher ed in your district, in the region, right? Obviously, you're just downhill from your place is Warren Wilson, obviously a private college with a deep history. UNC Asheville is right here. Western Carolina, of course, out in Cullowhee. And then we've got, community colleges that are very, very strong in our region. And so are there things that the General Assembly in particular can be doing to help these this kind of higher education and what higher education looks like in the state? And are there some things that the General Assembly is doing now that you think just aren't working?
Well, again, I worry about the politicization of higher education. The Board of Governors has been done some things over the years that worry me. Hiring chancellors that and they've been messing around a lot with Chapel Hill, setting up programs that they like. I just think the politicization of higher ed is just the wrong way to go about it. I had my one of my grandsons just graduated from Western. Love going out there. I have two sons that graduated from Warren Wilson. Jamie, who's doing our farming, he got inspired by working on the farm at Warren Wilson. Thank the Lord, he decided to come and take on our farm. And my son Doug graduated from there. He now is the owner and head of Sugar Hollow Solar, and very proud of his. He just got the B Corp designation, which means he's seen his business as more than just a generator of profits. And UNC Asheville has been struggling. Part of the problem has been the opportunity scholarships at Western. The promise scholarships. That was an Apodaca present to Western, making tuition $500 a semester, something like that, and that has helped Western get lots of students and great students, but it has harmed competing schools in the neighborhood, like Warren Wilson, like UNC Asheville. I understood the promise program for universities that were struggling, Pembroke, Elizabeth City. They needed that boost. Western didn't, and I think that's harmed enrollment at some of our regional schools. That's one thing that was, I think, a mistake. But as far as the community colleges go, boy, they are such an asset. And AB Tech is, people just don't realize how many students are going through AB Tech and all the other, Blue Ridge, all the others, Tri-County. They are doing yeoman's work. In this economy, you're not going to have the same job your whole life. You're going to need to be retrained, and I think that's going to get more and more the case. So we need these community colleges available, and they need to have up-to-date equipment to train people on, so they're not training people on obsolete equipment. And for somebody my age, we need great medical people. And these community colleges and Western have great programs in the medical field, and they need to be fully supported so that I get great hospital care when the time comes.
All right. Thanks. So I want to think a little bit about the structure of the North Carolina General Assembly. Again, I think you're in a unique position. Well, you and Brian Turner, who will certainly be returning on the House side, it looks like. So if you were to end up back in the North Carolina General Assembly and the Senate this time, are there any changes that you would propose in how the General Assembly is organized, just kind of the structure of the body? I think you've talked a lot today about some of the failures of the General Assembly recently. So are there structural solutions to those, and what might those be?
Yeah, boy, I don't know about that one. I think the political change would be at least to break the supermajority, and that's our big goal this time. The party in power determines the rules, So when we have the ability to sustain a veto, there are rules around that I would change. I don't know how many people remember the famous day in the North Carolina House when Deb Butler stood up and started yelling that we won't be bullied, we won't yield, when Speaker Moore pulled a veto of the budget when we as Democrats were told that there would be no votes that day. It was a little bit, maybe a little bit of a mix-up on their part. I don't really know the backstory, but it just put a dagger in the trust of everybody in that body, that was all on national news, and I'm very proud that my right elbow was on national news because I was Deb Partner's seatmate. And when they turned off her microphone, I was able to give her mine. Keep going. That's they also talk about veto garages down there where you put on the daily calendar every day that you're going to vote on the veto override, and then you count who's there, and you keep it in the garage until you get the right vote. There's some things like that. The government is based so much on trust between individual real people, and if you erode that trust, then the body becomes dysfunctional, and you just tend to get people fighting each other. And I would just push for rules that built trust and fairness and that kind of thing.
Great, thanks. Strikes me we're talking a lot today about agricultural issues and about some kind of more rural issues. And at the same time, it's pretty clearly the Democratic Party in the state and in the South in general and nationally has lost a lot of these rural voters, right?
That's correct.
Democrats aren't doing as well in rural parts of our state and in every state as they used to. So just kind of why do you think that is? Why has there become this disconnect between the rural parts of our state and the Democratic Party? And what can the Democratic Party do to try to build back some strength in the rural parts of our state?
Boy, there's a big question. Something I think about a lot as a rural person. So kind of why it happened. I think the GOP was smart in coming up with conservative values that and people people, farm families and families that have farming in their history see themselves as conservative. They see themselves as being able to survive on the land, to take care of their families, to be hardworking. Those are great values. The NRA was able to inject guns into that picture. If you're a rural person, we're out on the farm. We use guns. They're a part of life out there. But they made it into a kind of a cult. If I don't want to overstate it, but that the government's coming to take your guns away. That and rural people, that scared them. I think I helped start a church out in Fairview. I think the churches have painted Democrats as ungodly somehow or other, and they have been pushing. This has always been the case that churches have a conservative social value system, and they and as you can see, the bread and butter of Republicans is to look for those kind of social issues that scare people, the whole divisiveness about the reproductive rights abortion issues is certainly a part of that. I can understand how it happened. How we counteract it. I think they're I talk about conservative values being to take care of the land, as I've talked about, and to keep our water and air clean, I uphold the values of hard work and being able to take care of your family. Our rural areas, however, are struggling. Our rural areas are losing population. Another interesting and sort of counterintuitive aspect of this is that most of our big farms are dependent on migrant labor. Some of it legal, some of it not. To get produce picked in a timely manner over a 2-week period is critical. And the immigration battle that's gone on. I know for years, Farm Bureau, who are really the main spokespeople for agriculture in North Carolina, they were trying to rationalize the migrant labor problem so that our farmers could be sure they could get their produce picked. But that's run up against the sort of vehement anti-immigrant rhetoric that we have. I think there's an area there, and truthfully, these rural areas are filling in with migrant populations. When you drive around, you see it. Even in like Burke County, which is part of District 46, I've been amazed. They have the biggest Guatemalan population per capita in Burke County. Have a famous restaurant there now with an indoor soccer field, and the community embraces them. Another group that is in the sort of straddles the Burke McDowell line are the Hmong people who came over after the Vietnam War. There's a large population. A lot of them work on the chicken farms. They're growing rice down there, coming up here to the tailgate market, selling their own rice that they've grown. Another very interesting, Asian population that those two counties have embraced. So somehow, in all this anger about immigration, we need to have rational policies. We need to see we need the labor in so many areas, and we need to have policies that revitalize rural North Carolina and keep it economically strong.
Great. Thank you. And so you mentioned somewhere in that answer too briefly about reproductive health, women's health, abortion, whatever kind of label we want to put on it. So obviously the General Assembly has changed some laws about that lately. Kind of what is your take on that suite of issues? What would the right policies look like for our state?
Yeah, and to be truthful, I this is a difficult issue. I think anybody that thinks about it seriously, it's a difficult issue. What in the political realm, it got boiled down to a binary, pro-life, pro-choice. It's either you're one or the other. You're either for abortions or you're against abortions. It's a way more complicated issue than that. And that's what I've come to realize. Even the 12-week ban in North Carolina, even that took 47 pages of a bill to write. Trying to codify into law all of the problems a pregnant woman can encounter is just foolish. And I've heard many people complain about the 47 pages, that there's, it's difficult to actually implement. And doctors are not sure where they stand a lot of the time. So my position now is I would like to go back to the guardrails of Roe v. Wade. I think they were reasonable, and I think if, as I do, you wish that there were no abortions, then you work on it at the community level. You go to your families or you go to your churches, and you say you want to make sure every woman, and really every man, but every woman that has a problem pregnancy, that you as a family or you as a church or you as a community are going to support them spiritually and financially if they want to bring that baby to term. the biggest reason that people feel like they need to have an abortion is they don't think they can face the economics of another child in their family. We ought to, we're the richest country in the world. We ought to be able to manage that, and it's coming up. I think both Harris and Trump have thought about some sort of $6,000 credit when you're pregnant. I can remember, I'm old enough to remember 1973 when Roe passed, and it was mostly the Republicans that were saying, well, great, all these welfare mothers will now have abortions and we won't have a lot of welfare babies that we got to take care of. That was the GOP sentiment then, often. I just think it's just way more complicated, and as we hear more and more stories of difficulties, the bottom line is after Dobbs, apparently there's more abortions. It didn't do anything to slow down abortions. Now we have every state with different rules. Doctors are struggling, nurses. So I think the thing to do is to go back to a national standard, the Roe v. Wade standard, and then work on the problem closer to home.
That's great. So we'll be closing up here in just a minute, but I did want to ask you a little bit about how elections run in North Carolina. This didn't used to seem like a political issue, but sure seems like it's become one lately. And if memory serves, you had a pretty close election yourself not that long ago locally. So kind of what is your take on how elections are run in North Carolina and some of the changes that we've had to how our elections are run through the General Assembly?
Well, yeah, and it's been a very contentious area of politics. And the whole big lie of 2020 has allowed Republicans to try to make it more difficult for people to vote in a lot of cases. They're talking to, one of the bogus issues that they brought up from this is that non-citizens are voting, when that's just not true, but it's become a huge issue. And I think we're voting on something like that in the Constitution. That's right. Which is, a distraction, a non-issue, but it serves their political purposes to have people think that a lot of non-citizens are voting. So are you asking certain people that look foreign a little bit, that they have to prove they're citizens? What do you have to have some sort of document? I don't know exactly how that would even work. But the core of the problem to me is ending the gerrymandering. Of course, people say, well, we've always had gerrymandering, but it's never been like it is now with computers. The maps that came out of the 2011 when the Republicans took over the General Assembly they told Mr. Hallfalter at Red Maps, he said, you take it to the max. We want to maintain control of the state in North Carolina. And you see the big disparity between red and blue voters versus who gets elected. The Supreme Court declared that gerrymandering was unconstitutional by the North Carolina Constitution, and that we changed the maps, had good maps after that, fair maps, and then after the election of 2022, the court went 5-2 Republican, and I would boldly say it's become a very partisan court, and it's seen that way. They immediately brought that decision up and reversed it, telling the General Assembly, go at it. You can gerrymander to your heart's content. That's, from an individual voter point of view, first of all, my districts have changed every 2 years. People don't really know who represent them. They kind of despair knowing who represents them. It discourages people from being involved in politics. But the bigger issue is that people feel like it's rigged. Gerrymandering is a form of the rigging. The money is another form of the rigging. Money's harder to deal with. I think anyway, I'm a little bit mad today just because that state Supreme Court said the state had to redo all those ballots and get Kennedy off. That's $1 million hit for North Carolina. It's going to delay sending ballots to overseas soldiers, it was a fairly partisan decision on their part. Even one of the Republicans voted against doing that. It was a 4-3 decision. So there's a lot of the other rules that have come up that I won't go into. A lot of the details of how elections are conducted have also had a partisan edge to them. And I'll just remind people that the courts ruled that the gerrymandering of the past was done with surgical precision to minimize African American voters in North Carolina. That's the kind of thing you can do.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I think that brings us right to the end of our time. So I want to thank John Ager for running for office, for being here today. I want to thank WPVM for giving us this opportunity. And, of course, thank you for taking your vote seriously and learning more about the candidates and the issues so you can cast a more informed vote. So have a great day.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.